back with another fireside chat with Derek and I, and we're spending a whole lot of time working on Guide Foundation and putting all these programs together, and doing we're really deep into this stuff. And part of the whole mission of the Guide Foundation is around the mental health and suicide prevention piece for adoptees. And I mean, this is a hard subject. And I want to say for so many of us, I think it's actually a personal, we're personally touched by it. We have personal experience with it. So it's nice that we have support for each other and we check in with each other. But something came up recently where it really kind of became a personal experience as we're diving into this work and building up this foundation. And I know that you came across a post or something and you read into it, and you just had this instinctual connection, something that you've really kind of been clear about. You noticed, you saw, like, what was it?
Yeah, thanks, Moses. Unfortunately, we had a friend of ours post something somewhat cryptic last week, and then they made the decision to attempt to take their life. And that was the day after the post was published. And the alarm bells that rang off in my head are that ability to sense that is only because I was in the exact same position that they were. And so it's not well, this is what I would have done, but it was a situation where reading that last paragraph, I knew exactly what the intentionality was. And I became immediately concerned. And it's not the situation where, because we're doing so much work around, getting the right solution to reduce adoptee suicide. So, sometimes it's like a doctor that's convinced that everything is lupus, and you have to make sure it's not lupus. I don't necessarily believe that posts of frustration means that person's going to try and kill themselves. Of course not. But there are certain statements that ring so clear. And I believe that it's not only myself that possesses this fluency in that's hidden language. I think that any CAD that has struggled with suicide and depression, severe depression that leads to these decisions, can understand what that person is saying. And as someone that has struggled with it from very early on in my life, to my last attempt in 2009, the language is very clear to me. So that's how I was able to identify what the issue was, because I speak the language fluently.
Mm-hmm. So something that you and I were talking about before, about we're in this space and we're doing the work that we're doing, and it just feels like it's not fast enough. We can't build this, sooner. Knowing that there are adoptees, that there are people in general, but certainly adoptees who are in pain, who are thinking about suicide, who are there in that space. And I think part of our intention for wanting to have this talk is there's a certain level of importance or a certain level of urgency, a certain level of saying, um, we're aware on a daily basis that there's many of us who are suffering. Um, uh, you mentioned something about finding the solutions, or finding the best solution, or finding a solution. And I think, stop me if you've said this already, but I mean, this is how hard it is. It's just even hard to be present in a conversation like this, right?
It's absolutely agonizing. It's so painful. It is the thought today I had is, what if that person had succeeded, and the guilt that I would have felt that I didn't start working on this sooner. Some people out there know I've had discussions with them that I've been talking about this problem for a year, but I haven't put it into action. And the solution to address this alarming trend is that we have to come together. We have to understand and recognize the vulnerability exists for a large number. And I'm willing to talk about it so that people don't feel afraid to express it. They don't feel like they're abnormal or that there's something wrong with them. Apparently, the very act of our experience of adoption is traumatic. Whether we want to fully admit that or not, that is the reality, because the reality is represented in the results. I mean, we talked about many of them, as far as, the mental health disorders and the drug and alcohol dependency and ultimately suicide. And, so one of the things that I'm so excited about as far as your involvement is that we can figure out a solution for our community. It is a sustainable and self-determined solution where we feel that the best treatment for CADs that are going through this are other CADs. Just like I said, there was a language that you have to have a certain fluency with. I personally believe, and I have a strong suspicion that there's many others out there that believe that only another CAD can truly understand the experiences that are giving them difficulty in adjusting and living, a healthy life. And so, the end project, I can't wait to find out what your team is going to recommend as we tackle this problem next year. But what I do know is that solution not only will be for CADs, but it will be operated by CADs. And so hopefully the efficacy of treatment will be that much more successful, because there'll be a certain trust and willingness to go along this process of healing, because it's orchestrated by people that have been there. They've seen it, they've done it, and they cope with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm also excited to see how that develops, and definitely right there with you that the CAD experience is such a unique one. It's so individual, and something that crossed my mind is there's something about being a survivor, knowing that we've been through that initial trauma, and we've been in that headspace of seeing life as a life and death situation. Uh, and how do we get beyond that? Or how do we get from surviving to living? How do we come together when so many of us have a range of different adoptee experiences? Uh, but it it's fascinating that we do have this similar experience, this similar uh, common denominator that we keep falling back to. But there's something about being a survivor uh, and this obligation or sense of responsibility to say there's a reason I've survived, and I'm including myself in this, right? Um, and I haven't been it's a piece of myself that I haven't really shared with anybody. Um, but I'm in the same space with you guys, right?
I think,
Um,
to wrap it up, Moses, I think that so my adopted culture is Pennsylvania Dutch, right? And that's the Amish and Mennonites.
okay.
And the Amish are famous for their barn raisings, right? Because the whole community comes together, and it might be a single farmer or a single family that needs that barn, but everybody comes together, and that barn is raised with astonishing rapidity. And it really boggles the mind for people that aren't familiar with Amish and Mennonite customs. They're like, oh my, how did you do this? You built a barn almost literally overnight. And that's the one, I think, encouraging thing is, I'm not asking us to be Amish and drive around in horse and buggies, but what I'm asking us is to embrace a sense of community and a sense of shared responsibility. And if we could all focus a little bit of our energy, the collective power of 100,000 plus people that are resilient and strong and have experienced that trauma and precisely your word, survivors, right? So if hundreds of thousands, well, 100 to 125,000 of us worked in unison, in singular focus to address this issue, uh, we're going to save some lives this year, next year, and going forward. So that's really all that is required is for us to, be honest, to have conversations like this that somewhat normalizes the pain that so many of us feel and many of us find difficult to cope with. But then, be a catalyst for that collective attention, the lightning rod of decision and action so that we can reduce these numbers because they're not healthy numbers. And that's something that is a poor reflection on us as a demographic. And that's really ultimately what we're seeking is to create a solid culture of what it means to be a cat. And one of the things that we don't want associated with it is, oh, you guys are really good at killing yourselves. We want it to be, oh, you guys are amazing at overcoming obstacles. And you really unite and circle the bandwagons and take care of your own. So that's, ultimately, I think the solution is solidarity in a serious issue and just giving it some attention because ultimately you don't really know when it's going to hit you. Some people have dealt with trauma and they've hidden it so long, but it's always there. You can't excise it, and you don't necessarily know and have full control of when it comes back. And so we're working really hard to make this a primary issue. I'm going to keep on talking about this until I'm hoarse or dead because it needs to be discussed, because it needs to be treated.
I'm glad to be working with you and work together on this. Yeah, I couldn't have said that better. So really, thank you for taking up the mantle and with this clarity and vision and sense of responsibility and just to highlight what you're saying about community and resilience and survivorship. Uh, and when we talk about the 100,000 plus or 125,000 plus, that's how many CADs exist today, right? And
In the United States, it's estimated 250,000 in globally. Yeah, Korean adoptees around the world. Yeah.
But I think I want to make this point that going forward, that's the number today. But going forward, I think adoptions are going to continue, and there's going to be more cabs coming up in the future. And I think for me, part of what makes it so meaningful to be doing this work now uh, with what I've been through and what I know and who I've met and connected with, it's so important to be thinking ahead for future generations as well, and our kids and grandkids and so on and so forth as well, right? And I think there's something you just to make a quick point that um, there is a cat community, but we also have family members, right? We have spouses, we have people who are supporting us and caring for us. Um, it's great to have these CAD groups. It's great to have these spaces for these kind of discussions and posts and things for us to connect. But what about our family members? Um, it's taken us this long to create groups and communities for us to come together. And also have cultural camps and those kinds of things. Um, what do you know of any things to support the supporters?
What an incredibly devious question, Moses. So, yeah, not a shameless plug, but you know, I have an absolutely incredible wife and partner. And a couple of years ago, when I was experiencing that the difficult going back to Korea and reuniting with Hanmu, we quickly realized that there's a demographic that's been underserved and unfairly so. And those are the people that are lucky and unlucky enough to love us. I mean, let's be frank. We our issues have issues. We're a tough people group to love, and it's not easy. And so, my wife recognized that and thought that there should be a space for people to really understand us and to kind of, commiserate a little bit as far as, the challenges. And so it's called Korean American Adoptees, Partners, and Spouses. So CAPS. It's a Facebook group page. No cat is allowed on it. I don't know what my wife talks about or does because it's none of my business. And she gives me the space and respects the space that we have as CADs, and I give her that same respect. And so I don't know what they talk about, but hopefully it helps them. And so if you are finding stress, and it might be because it's difficult for your partner to understand what you're thinking, please understand one thing: it's communication is two ways. So it's equally difficult for them to understand you. And so there is a resource, and maybe suggest, hey, why don't you join this group? Because that it could be profoundly educational for that side as well. So thanks for mentioning it, Moses. I think it's a pretty cool talk. We've gone a little bit over. Our next fireside chat will probably be something like a little bit more lighthearted, maybe why Korean metal chopsticks are the worst invention ever created or something like that. But did another fireside chat with Moses and Derek, and we will see you guys another time. Take care. Bye.